All right, hello everybody. My name is David Palmer, and I'm here to interview David R. Gillie, who's running for Cache County Clerk. Would like to hear a little bit about yourself, a little bit
Okay.
about your bio,
All right,
where you come from, how long you've been here, and
great.
your family and
Great.
such.
I'm a late returnee to Utah. I did several portions of my growing up here, including college. Went to BYU a million years ago in the 80s. Then I spent 30 years on the coasts with the United States Navy. And I didn't intend to come back here. I intended to retire in the Rockies. But my wife died, and I, to surprise myself, met a second wife and family, and my second wife was living in Logan. I was living in Maryland when I met her by a series of miracles, and she was in love with this valley. So after I took her back to Virginia and Maryland and things for several years, and a couple of our kids, I got 7 new kids in the bargain when I married my second wife, so that was a blessing. By then, 2 of them were married and living in this valley, so that was a huge attraction. Grandchildren. I have 2 married children, each living 4 blocks from here. So I've got 6 grandchildren and another one to arrive in December, and 3 children living at home, and kind of a half-son, family friend who lives with us and wish we could adopt him, but I don't think his folks will give him up. And a couple kids in Virginia and 1 in Colorado. Anyway, I've been here about 4.5 years.
Excellent. And tell us a little about your background. What your profession has been.
Okay. Probably the most important thing about me and what drives me running for county clerk and what drove my vocation is that I'm the first American citizen in my family. And that has always been tremendously important to me. I'm obnoxiously, some people say, American. And throughout my, not throughout, but through the latter 10 or 15 years of my Navy career, I've taught civics off and on just as an avocation. I've lectured in 10 states on American civics and some beautiful sacred sites. I've lectured on Lexington Green and Boston's Faneuil Hall and on Gettysburg and a lot of not so famous, not so important sites, but to me the important thing is teaching civics. That's a passion, has been a passion since I was a boy. And that's why I joined the Navy. I felt I had an obligation. It took me a while to arrive at that conclusion, but by my about 23rd birthday, I realized that what my mother had told her teenage son was right. You're always talking about what a great this country this is. If you don't serve at least some period in the service, I think, as your mother, that you're a hypocrite. So I did. I served 30 years in the Navy.
All right, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Well, tell us about what you think qualifies you to run for this office, and what, and also if you would bring in some of your differences with your opponent. You're running against the current
Okay.
county clerk,
Right.
Auditor Bryson Bound.
Right.
Right.
I'm glad you asked it that way, because had I been satisfied with the way in which the incumbent is filling that office, you couldn't have prevailed upon me to run. I have some strong disinclinations, even though I'm passionate about civics. I had some real misgivings. It took me several months. But when I moved to this valley, you have to know I moved here in February of 2020. So think back to February of 2020. What would strike you as a move in to this county? What struck me was we were in the midst of a COVID dictatorship. The governor was acting like a dictator. He wasn't the only one by any means, but he was making it up and ruling by decree. Obviously, he hadn't read or hadn't taken to heart the Utah Constitution, which gives him no legislative authority whatsoever, and which protects against, if the legislature had gotten into its mind to do some of the things that he did, would have prevented that. But the other thing that really struck me and appalled me and still does, is that we had pretend elections. And what I mean by pretend elections is not genuine elections, not what you and I owe each other as citizens. And you could count off a list of things, but I think they begin with voting in precincts with people whom you know because they live in your neighborhood, voting in person, voting on paper ballots, and everybody in your precincts is potentially able to challenge the qualifications of any voter in that precinct, and potentially able to watch and challenge any controversial call when they're canvassing those ballots, and to observe, most important, to observe and be there from start to finish, whoever in that precinct desires. And it doesn't take every one of us to do that, but it takes, for the integrity of the system, for the confidence between you and me, and for the self-respect and the respect for each other, it does require that we do this together by precinct. Certainly a shopping list or a minimal list includes that those ballots are physically counted, not counted by a machine. As I learned more, I learned that our statute makes it illegal for any of us to know what the algorithms are in that machine, or when they're changed, with a trusted build, for instance, how they're changed. That's just appalling. It's impossible under that system to have a real election. And a real election is, I feel deeply, one of the most basic things that citizens owe each other. Yeah. So that's why I'm doing it. The incumbent is quite happy, quite content to let things go on as they are. This is our election statute right here. It's a monstrosity. It doesn't, by the way, it's 743 pages, 28,433 words. It doesn't take that many pages or words to do a real, honest election. In fact, here are two previous election laws that we've had that very clearly and in a way that everyone understood called for and effectuated real elections in which everyone had absolute confidence. So it's relatively easy to do it honestly. It takes some real imagination and probably a lot of partisan maneuvering back and forth in the legislature over the last 15 or so years to come up with a monstrosity like this. But what I like to point out is if you execute this perfectly, and it is the duty of the clerk to execute this as written, and if I'm elected, that will be my sworn duty. But perfect success, 100% success in that cannot possibly, it's logically impossible for that to create a real election. There are too many statutory impediments. By the way, did you know that 40% of our voters are not known to each other by name and address and phone numbers? We have 4 classes of voters by this statute, and
I think
one of them is private and one of them is withheld.
Withheld.
Those two make up about 40% of Utah voters that are just lumped into an unknowable lump mass, and that's another problem. There are a lot of problems, but
well, let me take off on that point right here.
Yeah.
The lieutenant governor has stated that it's really not in the interest of citizens of Utah to continually ask for election information for the purpose of verifying or auditing elections. She points out that the elections are now considered by the government as critical infrastructure.
You owe it to each other, and therefore you have to cede that privacy to the minimum of allowing your neighbors in your precinct. And again, it's really important to get back to precinct because election is knowable only at many small levels. We have 166 precincts in this county. It's unknowable when you amalgamate even 10 precincts, let alone amalgamate an entire county or lump in an entire state, 40% of which are invisible or, they're actual, verifiable ability is invisible. So that's something you have to make a choice. I can be anonymous or I can be a citizen.
Yeah.
A certain degree of knowability to my neighbors is a function of serving as a juror and serving as an elector in a republic. And those in a precinct have not only a right but a duty to each other and to their fellow citizens in other precincts to ensure the integrity by, again, potentially challenging each other. Wait a minute, Mrs. Jones doesn't even live in this precinct. Wait a minute, that potential for challenge, it's not the challenge itself, but that potential for challenge where it's appropriate is the only way that we can ensure each other that what we have is something real, that I can look you in the eye and you can look me in the eye and we can look Steve in the eye and say, yeah, I have confidence that we've done this honestly and that there is no other way. And so that's just one of many flaws in this monstrosity of a statute. And again, coming back to the clerk is going to be duty bound to execute this as it is. But I intend, if elected, to use the office itself as an opportunity to use it as a bully pulpit to incessantly try to persuade the fellow citizens in this county and the county council and ultimately the state legislature, because that's the only place where we can change the statute, to make the journey step by step back to real elections. And and the incumbent is quite happy. He's made that quite clear. I want things to be quiet again. He's on record as saying, I want the county clerks to be a quiet office again. What I think he was referring to was his predecessor's attempt to get citizens in this county to know, hey, did you know the statute allows you to opt out of mail-in voting? Just that one little step in the direction of real elections brought the holy hell from the governor and lieutenant governor and all the press down upon him. And manufacturing scoundrels, kind of like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. If you ever saw that movie, you try to do something honest and you're vilified and run out of town.
Let's talk about that just a minute. Looking at the 4 phases of the election process, you have the registration, and then you have the validation, the tabulation, then finally the reporting. Do you see any particular vulnerabilities in these phases under the current system that we have?
Well, yeah, under our current statute, I see 5 or 6 major vulnerabilities. First of all, the first step is knowing who we are and mutually, potentially challenging each other, assuring each other that in our precinct, we can't change the United States. We can't bring back single-handedly a free republic, No, but we can do our little duty as citizens of this county by knocking on the door of our county councilors and our legislature to do their job and help us move back to something real. But the very first step is knowing who you are. Okay, the Constitution of Utah requires that I be a citizen of the United States for, 90 days? The Constitution of the United States requires that I'm 21. And depending on the election for the office, requires that I be resident in this precinct or this county for, various amounts of time. That's all verifiable by each other and ought to be. That's the knowing who's voting. Of course, that's not possible when you have, again, by statute, 2 classes of voters that amount to about 40% that, well, they're either withheld or they're private, and they have concerns that trump our duty to each other to have real elections. I don't buy that, and I don't think we should. I think the fact that we bought it, I think we've more acquiesced in it without thinking it over too hard. But I think we need to rethink that and realize, oh, that's a terrible mistake. That's a terrible letting each other down. Then the next step is actually casting the votes, then everybody watching them as they're canvassed, and if there are any controversies, you've got in earlier election laws, we had 3 sworn election judges. That's a perfect thing. They're under penalty of perjury, they're sworn, but everybody else there is just watching and doing it together and watching if there are any questions, oh, I'm not sure about that. Well, let's lay that one aside and then let's adjudicate that, because the election judge, usually under most election judge laws, including ours, has the ultimate responsibility to make that call, but he's doing it, he or she's doing that in full view of everyone else. Then there's the tabulation, then there's the reporting. All these things need to be done in full view of everyone.
Let's talk a little bit about outcomes of elections. What happens? Let's say you've got a really close race. Such a situation happened in the 2022 primary, Republican primary. This is for Washington District, House District 72. Willie Billings, who was a former chairman of Washington County. District 72 covers Washington County pretty much. And also was served as the vice chair for the state Republican Party.
Nice.
Yeah, very prominent individual. Raised about $100,000 for the party also. Anyway, he was running, and the outcome of that was a 7-vote loss in the first count. After the ensuing recount, automatic recount, it turned into a 10-vote loss. And he asked for a full forensic audit of the ballots. With such a narrow margin there, that would seem would be a reasonable request. But the county refused.
Okay.
They just did the recount. But he had some volunteers come in and help him, which they all got together and they did. The county did a random sampling of the precincts to be able to pull, or the batches to be able to pull.
Okay, so they
they
actually looked at the physical batches, or?
Yeah, they did pull some to look at the physical batches, and they brought in some statisticians also. Well, these people actually volunteered. Willie Billings didn't know these people. One was Cindy Butler, who is a longtime veteran, I guess you might say, of statistical analysis and doing work for businesses and helping them with statistical modeling. Been at that over 30 years. Another was Wendy Gedlewski. She's good at numbers, but she was assisting Cindy for the most part. They came in and they began a statistical tabulation, and they brought in recorders, and they so that they could record the count as it was going along, and they would do their tabulation at the same time. Anyway, at the end of this, they found that through their analysis that Mr. Billings won that the count by 62%, 62 to 38%. Yeah, he also won 75% of the batches that were pulled.
Okay.
Yeah, and both of those are statistically significant.
That it sounds, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm no mathematician, but that sounds very,
Yeah.
very significant from a photo finish loss to a very healthy.
Right.
So they actually did this by re-examining some of the physical, a good deal of batches of the physical ballots.
Yeah, the ballot images. They were actually examining the ballot images themselves. Yeah, and they found a few anomalies too, which did modify it slightly. Anyway, there is the current procedure for adjudicating this sort of thing is simply to do a recount.
Yeah.
And
Let's recreate this. Let's recreate the same result, wrongly or rightly.
Yeah.
But algorithmically, we're not changing anything. or is that where you're getting at?
Yeah, and statistically, there was they calculated a 1,000 to 1 chance that the 7 vote or 10 vote, I guess, adjudicated 10 vote loss was the real outcome. And
So I imagine that left a lot of uncertainty, a
Yeah.
lot of
yeah, the public
hate
there
and
was a
discontent,
real
a lot
public
of,
outcry about
a
it.
lot of bad feelings, and
Yeah.
and most of all, a lot of uncertainty.
Right.
Right.
Right. And let's say you're in a situation like this. You've got a 7 vote. You have 7
Well,
vote
you know,
loss. You've got
Yeah.
and you've got the lieutenant governor who's basically being neutral in the whole thing. You've got the county council. When they went before the county council. The county council allowed no public input. They did let him speak.
Of course, by statute, they're the board of canvassers. They have the ultimate unenviable task to certify an election that I've made the point several times cannot actually be certified. They're asked to swear to what they cannot know. And when you go to the court of law and you have this witness says this and this witness, the cross-examination usually goes after 2 things. One is the character and veracity of the witness. 2, how does or does not or this witness come into a way of knowing this, and that's the problem here. We, of course, we want to elect county councilors that will have integrity to do the right thing as they see it in a conflict. God bless them. But even more so, I argue that we need to amend our statute so that it is possible for them to know what the statute right now asks them to certify, which it is not now possible to know. One, by not knowing the verifiability of who the voters are. 2, by their being all lumped into a big mass and not in a precinct. 3, and probably most screamingly, the lack of physical witness counting, and in place thereof, algorithmic counting, where the statute makes it unlawful for you or me or the clerk or any of the board of canvassers to actually know the algorithm that was used. Does it multiply all Johnny votes by 1.2 and divide all Sally votes by, I don't know. And what did the trusted build, how did that amend it? I don't know. I'm not allowed to know. But anyway, so again, I'll beat that horse till I'm blue in the face if I'm elected, because it needs to be beaten. And until we rouse ourselves from this kind of stupor or lethargy or whatever it is that we've gotten ourselves into, and acquiescing in something that is just, as I see it, fundamentally unacceptable, viewed from the standpoint of what you and I owe each other as citizens. Boy, that's a tough one, but again, the clerk knows all he can do legally is follow the statute. But what he can do morally, influentially, persuasively, or however you want to say that, I think is tremendous. Because he has a duty to administer this, and therefore people potentially will at least think about listening to what he has to say if he tirelessly makes the case that we got a real problem here, Houston. We have five ways from Sunday that we can't know as citizen to citizen that we've done the most basic duty to each other honestly. And I mean, jury duty, voting, those are among our most fundamental duties that we owe each other. By the way, anyway.
Yeah, but
I'm
the
sorry,
outcome of that was, the county let the vote stand,
But that
the
ultimate,
lieutenant governor
Yeah.
also, he went to the lieutenant governor and he wanted some help. He wanted the bully pulpit of the lieutenant governor at least to try to persuade.
right,
There was no statute requiring the lieutenant governor to do anything.
well, the same thing with the clerk here. There's nothing in the statute that says, hey, you're going to be the county clerk is also the crusader for sound civics. But I envision myself exercising that role and exercising that opportunity. Our greatest public servants in any sphere, when you think, well, I say greatest public servants, you'll think of Washington, you'll think of Lincoln, okay. But even at the local level, have a virtue often, and that is that they understand they are servants, but they are also potentially persuaders of their fellow citizens to tell me to do better. You ultimately tell me what to do, but you read Washington's letters, Lincoln's letters, the greatest, they're also persuading their masters, their fellow citizens who are their masters, to do a better job and give me better instructions. It is in your and our common interest, if we desire to maintain a republic, to do X, Y, and Z. And well, in the writ small, in the little county, that's how I see this.
Do you see the county clerk?
Oh wow! Hope that's not someone stealing my signs again. I had 3 signs stolen, just that I know, just today. And last week a big banner. Never mind, that's neither here nor there. But I hope that lady's not taking one of mine right in front of my yard.
Might help.
It might not be.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I shouldn't be looking out the window. I should be looking at
We're
you.
probably out of time here. But just in general, do you believe that the citizens, or that the county government and the state government have an obligation as servants to the people to provide the citizens with a way to verify their own elections outside of the current system that's in place right now?
Well, yes, I see that as a great imperative. Every